Hey everyone, Temporal here, and today we are covering some Overwatch. So, specifically, we're going to talk about Overwatch and how to improve at it. If you've listened to my content for any amount of time, you're probably aware that I and many coaches obsess over angles and timing. And there's a very good reason for that. Angles and timing make up the vast majority of Overwatch. In fact, if you include mechanics, I would say they make up all Overwatch. And so there's three things you really want to be working on. Unsurprisingly, those are them. We're going to start here with mechanics. Get good, click heads. Obviously, that's a very simple thing. In reality, there's a little bit more to it in terms of movement. But honestly, what 99% of Overwatch players need in terms of leveling up their mechanics is adequate mouse control. There is no shortcut for that. There is no, oh, how do I just get good mechanics? You have to work on that over time, and it sort of makes it the least coachable thing. It's why you tend to hear coaches talk about it the least. Yes, you can get feedback on how to get better on your mechanics, what your crosshair placement should look like in terms of where you should be holding it, where you should predict that people should be, going for bigger flicks into smaller flicks, how tracking needs to be predictive, not actually trying to follow where the opponent is. But the real thing with mechanics is it actually is in Overwatch 2 the thing that will get you the most bang for your buck in terms of improvement. It will do the most for winning you games. Having better mechanics will win you more games, both individually and as a member of a team, be that in the pros, be that in bronze games. Upgrading your mechanics is the surest route to success. But it's not the only route to success, and it's not the fastest route to success. Now, if you want to climb as high as you possibly can, start working on your mechanics early, so work on them consistently. It is like physical exercise. You cannot just go, oh, I start working on these and 2 days later they're good. You have to work on them over time to make them better. Could even be half an hour, 2 days a week. If you want to get good at Overwatch, even if you're bad now, but you want to get good, start investing that specifically in aim training. And do it as aim training. Not I'm having fun playing the game, aim training. That does that up. That does matter. That said, now we're going to move on to the stuff that if you want faster gains, if you go, hey, mechanics are fantastic and all, how do I get faster gains in Overwatch? How do I get better more quickly? How do I get better? How do I make my team better? Since, as a member on my team, I can't, for example, make the other players spend time working on their mechanics necessarily. Well, this is angles. Angles and positioning are the fastest route to improvement in Overwatch. They're the lowest hanging fruit for a huge reward. They're not quite the king. If we go back here, we can think to ourselves, hey, mechanics, those are going to be our king. Those are the best, but it takes work to get there. Have a crown, why not? There we go. Mechanics are our king. For angles positioning, we're going to have some low-hanging fruit. So maybe we'll have an apple with, I don't know, there's an apple. Maybe it's a cherry. It became a cherry. Low-hanging fruit. This is hanging low. This is the easiest thing to improve on. This is what you will hear me obsess about the most in reviews. If you are not using angles effectively, and very few of you are using them as effectively, even in Overwatch 1 when people got quite good at the game, GM was not as good at using angles as it should be. Angles are the easiest way to get better and are a significant steroid to what you can accomplish. So angles, which I'll also refer to as positioning, has a few major components that make it up. First off, more angles are generally better. But the design of the game is generally going to limit you to about 3 angles. Part of the design choices that do that is much of Overwatch is really divided up into 3 lanes, mid, left, right. That's just how most of the maps are designed. Another thing that's really going to do it is there really isn't enough resources, support resources, etc. to go around to support more than 3 angles. Some comps will get away okay with 2 angles. Other comps will use 3 angles, dive, basically requires 3 angles. Full poke comps might get away with 2 angles. We'll use 3 when they can. Brawl can very rarely take 3 angles, sometimes 6 to 1, but usually is going to try to get 2 angles there. Angles are very, very important. The more of them you can get and reasonably hold, the better. Bigger angles are also better. The reason bigger angles are better is if your opponents have to look at someone, say you are right here. Say you are right here and your teammate is right here. The opponents, if they're over here, they have to look there and there. When they're looking here, this guy is also on their screen. They can see this guy shooting at them. They can see the Junkrat grenade, the Fair Rocket, the Hanzo arrow coming at them, the Lucio shots, whatever, and they can potentially dodge those. It's pretty easy for them. It's not mentally very taxing. If instead you have a teammate who's over here looking at this opponent, does not in any way show them what's going on over here. They're almost completely blind to this, and that is mental load on them. It's mental stress. It's also something where they very much have to go, hey, they can get hit by shots because they're doing a strafe pattern, say, against the person they're fighting over here, which moves them left and right, doesn't do anything to your teammate over here who's shooting at them. So what do? What's the important key thing for getting bigger angles? You make them bigger. You make your angle as big as you can reasonably make it, not just so that you're not on the enemy teammate screen, but so that they really have to do bigger turns to see you, so that they can't see you, so that cover that worked against one of your teammates that they're using as cover, for their fight for strafing does not work against you. Angles compromise cover, angles compromise strafe patterns. Angles are so good, and the bigger the angle, the more it's going to compromise cover. The more it's going to set up great crossfires, make strafing not work, put mental strain on the opponents as they're having to rapidly check back and forth and not really getting the time to aim, can't just hold their crosshair, can't actively see what they're trying to dodge. This is the angle obsession that you will see me going over absolutely all the time. But the reason we call this angles and positioning is because the most important part of positioning really is angles, but there is a little bit more to it. You do also want to have cover available to you. You should have, when you're shooting at your opponents, from here, you should have a piece of cover within 1 to 2 steps, really. If it's taking you 4 steps to get to cover, if you're playing in the middle of the lane, you're just dead. There's no reason to be doing that. There is cover. The maps are not giant flat open spaces. There's always reasonable cover that you can be playing from that will greatly increase your survivability, especially in a game that has the amount of healing involved that Overwatch does. If you don't die, you are still quite valuable, even if you only have 5 HP left, because you can get healed back up pretty quickly. That does depend a little bit about friendly sightlines, which is something that you'll learn about, that you'll get to. It's much less important than having up to 3 angles in the first place. And if your team isn't taking angles, basically regardless of your position, this applies least to tank, but basically regardless of your position on a team, DPS, support, whatever, you need to add a second angle or perhaps a third angle for your team. You can get more SR by cranking the angle open bigger. You should be using cover. Even if you're having to play on the same angle as your team, you never have to play on the same angle as your team. You should be using cover until you're in the specific walk down on the enemy timing, which may be causing you to go into the open because that's where the enemies are and you're finishing them off in a brawl. You should understand friendly sightlines. You will not always have a friendly sightline of, hey, here's my teammate, here's me. Oh no, there's a physical barrier between us, but I can kite back like this to the place where I can get shot by, I don't know, little heal shots, and get healed up pretty easily. Understand what those friendly sightlines are, both for that and so that if your teammates get walked on, you can pew and shoot back at them and shoot the enemies in the side with a giant angle, making it really hard for them to dodge, really hard for them to pay attention to you, and trade back those kills or prevent those kills from happening. Even if you're a damage dealer up here and can't heal your teammate, you can shoot the Genji, the Tracer, the Winston, the Reinhardt, the whatever that walked in the back of the head and massively increase your team's win rate. Finally, there's kite path. It's going to be related to the friendly sight lines here. It's just understanding, especially if you go forward to pre-poke at the enemy here. Okay, how are you going to get out? You might go take a 2v5 in Overwatch, but you're not taking it for real. You're just putting a little bit of pressure on their respawns, and then you have a way to kite out that doesn't get you stuck. It might cause you to be totally separated from your team and you can't get back to them, but if you get pushed by the enemy when you're separated from your team, those enemies should be in a place where they get shot in the back by your teammates. This is what having a kite path means. It means not getting yourself stuck in a place where your teammates cannot threaten enemies that go after you when you try to retreat out. This is the easiest thing. These are all relatively simple things to do. There's no mechanical challenge in doing these. This is not some, oh no, I missed my step. I missed by bouncing off the wall to do my appropriate angular positioning. These are all very easy things to implement in Overwatch that, short of mechanics, massively increases your win rate. Again, this is true in organized play. This is true of GM1 players. Lots of GM1 players still have a good 20-30% room to improve on this, where they start to win a fight, and then, for example, they start to just automatically press W as opposed to sweeping outside to continue to increase that angle to get deeper and deeper into winning the fight there. Then we get into the third one, and this is timing or win condition recognition. And this is everything else. This is still important, but this is by far the most complicated thing to improve. When it comes to improving on mechanics, that's literally just hard work over time. It's literally just putting in the repetitions while being focused on it over time. Angles and positioning, you can get really good at that just by thinking about it and being a little bit dedicated on implementing it into your gameplay. It's really not hard to understand. It's really not that hard to do. It makes you a lot better at Overwatch. Timing or win condition recognition, this actually is harder. You look at this and what is this? Well, this is recognizing how you win. So for resource recognition, you'll see I've put this as one of the categories up here. You want to recognize when you have cooldown advantages. You need to recognize when you have health advantages. You need to recognize what ults you have versus what ults the enemies have. So yes, ult tracking goes in here, goes into this category. You need to recognize when your positioning is worse or better than the opponent's, because that's going to help you recognize, wait, are we actually ready to use the timing to pull the trigger to make this fight real or to stay in this fight, or do we need to change the state of the board before we try to say go, or do we need to leave, sort of thing. And then preferred engagement distance. This is, hey, we do recognize that we have a Reaper and you have a Hanzo, and we do not, in fact, want to be standing taking a long distance fight. We'll instead happily go, no, we're instead going to let this fight start at much closer range, rotate through high ground to get to you, corral you around, etc. But these are all pretty easy things to sort of understand, but actually tracking these becomes a bit harder. The more you play Overwatch, the more you think about this, the more you realize which cooldowns are important, which aren't. You get better at this win condition recognition at an individual level. Obviously, preferred engagement distance, this is something that you get good at very, very quickly. You recognize that very quickly and you go, hey, I know which heroes are longer range heroes, which heroes are shorter range heroes. It becomes harder when you macro it out to a team level standpoint and go, wait, when does my team want to take this fight versus not take this fight? If the enemy team is Reinhardt, Bap, Lucio, I don't know, Genji, Echo, and the other team is Orisa, Kiriko, Illari, Reaper, Soldier. Which is the brawlier team? Which of the teams is interested in a longer sight line fight versus making the sight lines short, etc.? That becomes a little bit harder. You get that with experience. You start recognizing, okay, maybe they're pretty even, maybe one team's worse or better, and that sort of thing happens. But the very basics of that of, wait, this is Mei, that's Soldier, yeah, I'm going to prefer Soldier for the ranged engagement. Icicle snipers are scary, but still, I'm going to prefer Soldier for the more ranged engagement. Okay. Then we move on to, so this is the resource recognition to win. Same thing when you go, wait, the enemy has shatter. We don't like that, but wait, we have grav pulse bomb and we already got lamp out. Great, let's do it. Let's do a big bang and win. But big bang isn't valid until we got that lamp out, as an example, or until we got Suzu out. Those are the sort of things that matter, that build up in terms of your win con recognition and are why it's more complicated. Recognizing, oh wait, we have 50% health on our tank, 80% health on everyone else, but we have 3/4 of our cooldowns. The opponents have 90% health on everyone, but don't have their lamp anymore, don't have speed amp anymore. Their barrier is only got 20% health left. We're actually going to win this fight. Again, that's recognizing the CDs, the healths, or again, positioning would be, hey, there's only 3 of us alive, there's 4 of the opponents alive, but we are positioned like this when the opponents are positioned like this and are all low health. Oh, we should stay in this fight. We should finish it off rather than kite our way out, etc. Okay, cool. More complicated to recognize, harder at a macro level to get than what we were seeing on this previous page about angles and positioning to recognize all this stuff for win condition stuff. And then we get to synergy. And synergy applies both to individual play and to team play, but it is the working with your teammates, including your ladder teammates. So a very basic form of synergy would be everyone wants to go at the same time. If we're doing a dive on the enemy team and we have something where, hey, our Tracer's coming from over here, our Sombra's right behind the enemy team, and our Winston is jumping here with our Zen behind them, or maybe our Anna behind them, and Lucio's going to go in with Winston, cool, and the enemy team is here, and it's perfectly okay in old school Overwatch to go, hey, now everyone pull the trigger at the same time. Timing is just hit the same time, and we go, and we win. And that's cool. It's a lot harder to do that in modern Overwatch because so many anti-dive tools have been put in that basically force dive teams to get some level of resource out before their dives can be successful. But in the old world, you'd have been looking at timing plus angles, go, they get it. Now you need resource recognition as a sort of greater thing than just all at the same time, so your timing is more complicated of, we're going to do this after we get lamp out, or we're going to do this after we get Kiri TP out, or we're going to do this after their tank jumps and now can't help them for 5 seconds, that sort of thing. These are all things that have made it more complicated, but the basics of synergy would be, hey, maybe we want to all go at the same time or the intended time. A Grav Dragon doesn't go at the same time, for example. There's an intended time, and it's the synergy to hit those things. Then we get into comms, which are part of synergy, but they're the things that are actually to help force people onto the same page. So calling enemy resources that came out, well, that's trying to line up everyone's resource recognition. If you saw that Flash came out because you're fighting on the flank and ran into a Casti, but your teammates don't know that, or maybe you're fighting in the core and you guys got Wraith out and you guys got Lamp out, but your Tracer doesn't know that because, he's battling another Tracer, he might need to double blink past their Tracer and join you in the brawl in the fight, but it helps to share that information to have that synergy. So that can be calling cooldowns that came out. That can be calling locations of enemies because locations are really a resource. It can also be calling for the team to go or calling the reaction that you want. That can be, hey, the monkey jumps you guys and you guys say you want to kite, you want to absorb it, whatever. Or maybe it's a case of walk, because one person on your team recognized, maybe it was you, maybe it's ladder. You recognized we just in this specific second have enough of an advantage that if we force the brawl, we are more likely than not to win. And that's important, and that's one person trying to share their resource recognition with the rest of the team to, from a synergy perspective, get everyone on the same page. The best path to synergy the fastest path to being able to execute on those small windows is actually all 5 players individually being able to recognize, wait, I see lamp, that was important. Wait, I see that the barrier is weak, that's important. Wait, I see hands came out, that's important. And they're all on the same page because they all want to do it. They're all already sort of primed, looking for it, etc. But we live in a less than perfect world. We live in a world where not everyone has perfect information. So you sort of try to force your teammates further onto the same page with comms to reinforce the synergy for the timing that everyone ideally would recognize you want to hit. Another really good thing with comms that's going to be in the same place of trying to buff up that synergy is reminding your team of what the win con should be or priming them for a play. So that could be the enemy team just swapped comps, just made adjustments. Maybe you guys were playing Tracer Hanzo before, and now the enemy is added in a Torb. Does that change how you need to take the fight? Now are you looking to take the fight in a more brawly way, in a more poke battle way, or are you trying to go, oh no, what we were doing of picking at the edges, softening them up, corralling, and then sort of expecting to win the poke battle once we'd softened them up and taken angles? Maybe that's not the answer anymore, or maybe what we need to do is we want to make the swap on our Tracer, come in with our own, I don't know, Sojourn and go, okay, now we've got the better poke. Now this is how we're going to win. Doesn't matter. The point is getting your team on the same page for how you're supposed to win does help, as does sort of priming them for a play. If they're expecting a play, they react faster. That's how human beings work. That said, again, the ideal version of this would be all 5 members of your team immediately recognize there were comp swaps. This is now the way that we win. Or I know what ults the opponents have and what we have. This is now our highest probability way to win. But we don't work in a perfect world where everyone is always there. So you use that communication to elevate people back to that level, get them on the same page, perhaps free up other members to be using a little bit more of their brain power on mechanics, a little bit less on thinking about some of these things, and then try to elevate them back to that level with comms. But that's it. These 3 things are everything, are literally everything that matters for Overwatch. Mechanics, level them up over time. They're incredibly important. You can't get them quickly, so you need to start working on them and do dedicated improvements. Angles and positioning, this is the low-hanging fruit, the way to quickly improve at Overwatch. Get better. It's fantastic. Everyone should, if you feel like, hey, I want to get better, hey, I want to push another rank up, you can almost certainly do this better, and it's pretty easy to do. This would be the longer term. There's a lot in here in WinCon recognition because it's reading the board. WinCon recognition is reading the board. It's being able to track the resources that are happening. That Hanzo doesn't have Storm Arrow anymore. That Kiriko doesn't have TP anymore. Oh, wait, but Lamp is going to be back in 2 seconds. Yes, if I do my Pulse Bomb right now, it'll work sort of thing, but it won't if I wait 3 more seconds. Like, all that stuff, recognizing that stuff, this is the more mental strain portion of macro. It's the harder part to do in a lot of ways. It's also, seriously, less important than angles and positioning. Angles and positioning really are more important. Mechanics are even more important. This is work. This is good. This is how you keep iterating and getting better, and you should work on this, but start working on this immediately. Get this down next. If you feel like, hey, I absolutely really do have this mastered, then you start moving into specific portions under this. And you don't just work on angles all at once. You do work on angles, but then you can dive deeper into, wait, can I be making my angles bigger? Wait, am I using cover well enough? Do I have consistent kite paths? Can I shoot at my teammates if they get walked on, jumped on, etc.? Can my teammates shoot at me if they need to throw me healing, if I get jumped on, etc.? And then timing, this is the bigger one that takes most of your time as an individual or as a team to continue to chew through once you really feel you have this locked down. Most of you do not have this locked down. Lock this down. This is why in so many of my reviews, you'll see me really focus on this and then focus on this less. This is still important. This is absolutely still important. And it's something you can improve on in reviews, in your macro work by thinking about the game, whereas mechanics don't really come from thinking about the game. That's what I really wanted to cover here. I can obviously get to questions in chat now. I can talk about which compositions lean on which of these things more heavily. I can talk about, other things that you might have questions on. Let me know what you guys want to talk about. Or by a Zim, well, yeah, for the players on console, I suppose that would be an option for increasing mechanics. Over what? Yeah, yeah. Hey, Toprak, how you doing? This is so well thought out and simplified. Genius, honestly. Why, thank you. Thank you. Um, you don't just work on mechanics in Scrim. Scrims are not constantly firing enough, constant battle. Overwatch has a lot of downtime. It's not real downtime. You're moving during it, you're scouting during it, you're taking space, pre-poking, backing off, you're planning what the next fight is going to look like, you're corralling your opponents to go towards the choke you want the fight to happen at. Overwatch doesn't have a lot of real downtime, but it doesn't let you practice something you want to work on in a focused way in scrims or in games the way that you can literally just by going, okay, I've got a code and this code is going to make me work on my aim for 20 minutes. Or even if you want to go into the freaking practice range and work on your aim for 20 minutes. The reality is the vast majority of you cannot reliably make your mouse do what it wants to do. That's simple. The reality is most of you do not have mouse control, and you can get mouse control even just in the practice room, the practice range, going, hey, I'm reliably putting my mouse in spots I want it to go. I can reliably put my mouse right here. I can reliably put my mouse right here. I can reliably put my mouse right here. I can reliably put my mouse right here and then keep it on this predictably moving bot. Not on the entirety of the giant bot, but on the little thin arm cannon part of the bot or whatever you want there. Most players do not have, simply put, real mouse control. They can get close, they can sometimes do it. It doesn't take anything crazy advanced to do that. It takes practice to be able to do that. Wow, Overwatch vid? Hey, Semitic. Okay. How is Overwatch still going on, or how is the video still going on? A lot of instructions for how to win Overwatch 1. Buy the Battle Pass, buy cosmetics, even if they're in the Battle Pass, keep playing the game, watch Al. Oh, wait, yeah, that fourth one could be hard going forward. How far you get, just have mechanics and ankle positioning. Can you work timing later on the road? So the reality is if you try to work on anything seriously, as you're playing the game, as long as you're not completely writing off mechanics and just going, I don't care, I'm not thinking about it at all, but say you're playing the game and while playing the game you're working on angles and positioning, your mechanics will get a little bit better. And as you're playing the game, even though you're mostly thinking about angles and positioning and working on that and going, hey, I'm going to get better. I'm really trying to wrench open these angles in bigger ways, trying to make sure that my team always has at least 2 angles. You're going to start noticing things like, oh, I can't help but notice that if Reaper doesn't have Wraith and I have the Storm Arrow, yes, I am forcing that duel. Or vice versa, if, Hanzo doesn't have Storm Arrow and I have Wraith, I'm going to force that duel with him on the flank here. You're going to sort of realize that that's a thing, and that's a very minor part of resource recognition, but it's part of it, and you'll start to build out, and you might have a fragmented thing of win-con recognition, and that you start thinking about some CDs, you start thinking about some ult matchups, and you are calling go for your team, and that's it. Okay, so that's fine. You're not really thinking about opposing's health and how quickly it can bounce back up. You're not really thinking about, is the opponent's positioning or ours better when we're going? But you're thinking about some of the CD matchups. You're thinking about some of the ult matchups. And that's just going to happen as a result of you playing the game while you're working on wrenching open those bigger angles, for example. But once you feel like you really do have angles and positioning, and this is not hard. Angles and positioning are not hard. You can get this 90% down in a couple weeks. You just have to actively remind yourself, wait, no, I can make this angle better. What does my kite path look like? Do I have cover while I'm doing this thing, or am I just dancing in the open? None of these are actually hard to do. But there are a lot of value in Overwatch. Am I making sure my team has at least a second angle, even if my team won't support on it, and I feel like the Anna just pays no attention to me when I'm on a second angle because I'm not right in front of her? It's still better than your team not having it. It really, really is. Some of this will build up naturally. That said, you should start working on this immediately. You should really be working on this while you continue to put your reps in at the mechanics gym over time on this. And then once you feel like you have this, which really doesn't have to take more than a couple weeks, you can focus on this and get all of these subcategories under angles and positioning to a very high level if you're serious about it in just a couple weeks. Then you move on to timing and win con recognition. And I do the same thing if, when you're coaching a team. Make sure this works. Make sure this is important, especially if your team is playing poke or dive. You gotta have this down. You absolutely do. It still matters for brawl, but it's a little bit less important. And then you start working through this stuff. You start going, okay, yeah, ult tracking is really important in organized play. Ult tracking is still less important than is your team taking angles. Sorry, it is. Calling out where the enemy locations are helps us and makes us better. Yeah, it does. And you can do that, and you can start working on that and have your team do that, and that's a good thing for your team to do, but only because it helps your team get synergized for understanding when they want to walk. And that's harder to get right, quite frankly. Getting your team to all hit when you want them to hit is quite frankly harder than getting your team to take different angles. It is. So I'd then work on this after you feel like you have a good point. And then you can't just work on this. This is just too big of a thing to digest. It really is. So even though this really is just one thing, the three things that make up Overwatch, you sort of have to start digesting this when you go, okay, well, I am going to really be thinking about the CDs that are important. Okay, or maybe you've worked this out from, what, I've been seeing a lot of this meta. I know I'm running into this. Or I play this hero. I start watching for specific CDs, and that starts going into your computer, the super brain that calculates how to win fights, and it gets better over time. And you can be working on this. You can VOD review to get better at this. This is absolutely something that coaching can help with, but this is something that you can do even when you're like, oh, I can't move my arm anymore. I don't want to hurt my wrist, etc. This is something you can go look back, look at games while in queue, think about all these sorts of things. Okay. How do I fix shaky tracking? What does shaky mean? If your tracking is too shaky in the sense of like you can't hold your hand how you want it to, you probably have your sensitivity in a place where you need to lower it so that you, aren't worried about that. If it's like super high and you tap the mouse and it bounces like that, you need to turn down your sensitivity. If it's a case of hey, it's shaky, beyond that, it could be a case of you're trying to follow what the stick figure that's moving around is doing with your crosshair, and that's wrong. You don't follow with your crosshair. You can't actually follow with your crosshair. What you need to do is you need to be predictive. You need to aim. You're just not fast enough to stay with how zero acceleration in Overwatch for most. Minimal acceleration in Overwatch. A few heroes have acceleration. You get into some Hammond and some Lucio stuff, but there's really not acceleration in Overwatch, and the movement speed is pretty fast. And with those things in mind, you have to be predictive with your tracking. You have to be going, I think this thing is moving left, so I'm trying to click here, and I'm actively trying to click here with my brain, and in practice I'm clicking more like here. Good. And you keep continuously predicting where they're going to be as you sort of drag your mouse around. And as soon as you guess wrong and they double back the other way on you let go, hit a flick, and do it again, sort of thing. And then once you're wrong again, you let go, do a flick, do it again, and continue holding it down while you're predicting where they're going. Remember when I used to practice mechanics for Overwatch? Those were the days. Did you know that playing Overwatch 2 is actually detrimental to romancing Shadowheart? I don't know. The Shadowheart romance wasn't that hard, man. So, well, I guess I wasn't playing that much Overwatch, just only coaching it. Fair. Blah makes a fair point. Do you value an effective angle higher over an angle that is not as effective but closer to healer range? Generally, I would Generally, I'm going to value the more effective angle, the angle that makes the opponents have to turn harder, that sort of thing. But it is going to depend in part on what my kite path looks like. If the opponents decide to push me, are they able to push me? Is there a health pack that I can retreat to? Is it a situation where if they push me, even though a healer can't hit me right now because there's a wall here and maybe a wall here, and I'm right here and my opponents are here and my teammate is right here, well, before the opponent can get to me and really give me too much trouble and wrench that angle open on me, I can get out to a place where the healer can heal me. Hopefully, I'll give them a second or two to react before the enemy continues around and finishes me off, and that's fine. I would prefer that angle right here to playing this angle the whole time and having it be a narrower, easier cone for the opponent to work on. It does change a little bit how you deal with your poke shenanigans. If you're here, you sort of are doing a constant pre-poke and being harassing and that sort of thing. Whereas here, you effectively get two shots. You sort of want to let the opponent settle, let the opponent start to pay attention in this direction, and then go, okay, I open the angle, I take my shot at you, and then hopefully I kill you. If I don't get an elimination on you, you shoot back, you do damage to me. I can close the angle either this way or this way. And if I want to open this angle again, I really only get one more real shot because if I take more damage, I'm kind of gone, sort of thing. Now, I do just as much damage missing health, so I can open that angle again, but I sort of don't want to do what I might do over here, which is I'm an annoying, sort of pestering you constantly, making you pay attention, some attention to me, so it's hard to pay attention to the ally. Over here, I'm settling a little bit more for I will let you pay attention to my ally, and then I will go for that lethal strike. And then maybe I will actually not peek very often. You're still aware that I'm over here, and so it's creating some mental distress for you, but actually don't have to peek very often. I might let it ride for 2.5 seconds before I repeak because you still have to partially think about me for those 2.5 seconds, and then I can repeak. And at that point, it's really hard to still be looking at me. You've almost certainly drifted back to paying attention to my, and I can go for that there. Whereas here, I'd probably do shorter time windows. I still don't want to walk into a Hanzo arrow, walk into someone holding their crosshair on me, but because there's healing involved, I can play that a little bit different. Your mechanics are decent enough, but not perfect. Specifically saying, since you're in diamond lobbies, yeah, yeah, and angles and mechanics will have the most impact on where you land on the ladder. They will. Mechanics will have the most impact on where you land on the ladder on the vast majority of heroes. We could talk about that too. We could talk about comps that lean heavier on each of these concepts. We could also talk about roles that lean heavier on each of these concepts if we wanted to. So yeah, if you're diamond, you definitely don't have 4,400 mechanics. You don't. I know that. If you're diamond, you don't have 4,400 mechanics unless you have like 2 games played or something. But you can, push up literally a full rank off of angles. You could probably push up more than a rank off of angles, depending on how well you've implemented it. And I guarantee you have not implemented it as effectively as you could have, but you might have implemented it 50% as effectively as you could have, and then there's less room to grow than someone who's only implemented it 30% as effectively as they could have. I did make a PowerPoint, blah. You do mostly solo queues that should be easier to take angles. Opponents will bother you less about taking angles, and your teammates might flame you for taking angles a bit, depending on the level that you're playing at. I mean, your teammates may flame you. Full stop. You don't even need your teammates may flame you. Don't need any more to that statement. Whatever you're doing, your teammates may flame you, but you're slightly more likely to get flamed depending on what level you're playing at when you take angles. But you're also more effective. You're putting more control over the outcome of the match in your hand, and you have to. Mechanics are king. They are. But the second most important thing in determining the outcome of a lobby, and it is a very close second, is going to be Hey, does your team have at least a second angle? If your team only has one angle, your team is bad. And you by yourself can at least guarantee your team gets a second angle. Maybe a support will come with you. Maybe you have to take it yourself as the support. Your DPS are stacked with your tank. Doesn't matter. You can get at least a second angle in Overwatch. This applies a little bit less to the tank. Tanks can take a second angle, and that's still okay. But tanks really do have to lean pretty hard on timing. They cannot, especially in Overwatch 2, afford to be missing from the fight when their team needs them to be fighting. They're not always going to be fighting where their team wants them to be fighting, but they do need to. Tanks lean, generally speaking, more heavily on timing win condition and a little less heavily on angles. That's just how they are. They would still very much like their teammates to take angles. They very much would, and sometimes they'll take angles themselves. But, you know, and Orissa's probably not taking a significantly different angle than her team because a lot of her team will just line up behind her, and there's not much she can do about that. I pulled it up. I forget. I knew a week ago. Sorry, Val. I don't have the answer there. Blah might know. He seemed to write down my computer specs when I had them pulled up earlier. Oh, actually, I might. Nope. I'd have to go around to get that. How to battle a Kiriko or snipers? Is it movement that have to work on or take more cover poke? It's actually angles and timing. How could it possibly be angles and timing? So what you're looking at here is that's a little bit harder of a thing. First off, you need to have the aim to shoot them, to hit the kunai into the widow's head, or hit the Kiriko in the head with the scope shot, whatever the case is. You need the mechanics to do that, sure, but it actually is going to be if a widow is, which direction were you in? How to battle a Kiriko or snipers. Sure. So what you're looking at is, let's say your opponent is up here. Just they're here. They want to look at you right here, and you have cover because you're not terrible at the game. They want to look at you. They are holding their crosshair on you right here. And it's really easy for them to hold their crosshair on you right there if your entire team is stacked right behind you, or you're stacked with your team, because they know the only place that you can show up. But if you have a different angle than your team, now this Widow or Kiriko has to make a decision. She cannot point her crosshair at both places at the same time. Now, she has other teammates that might be doing it, but she cannot physically point her crosshair at both locations that you guys could be threatening her from at the same time because you have angles. Well, okay, but she could be aiming at either one, and I don't want to get my head shot off. True. That's an excellent point. But that is where timing comes into play. And you're going to start recognizing the resources. Did she just shoot a shot at my teammates, or did she just shoot a shot at me? If she just shot a shot at me, I actually can maybe peek and throw one quick kunai, throw one quick Zen Orb, and then close the angle again. Maybe continue if I hit her with that to keep the angle open. If she shot at my teammates, now I know, A, she's on recharge for a moment, if we're talking about a Widow. B, I know that her crosshair was away from me and she would have to do a big flick to get me. So right now is when I want to do that shot. Or maybe in this group, my Ashe somehow didn't get their head blown off because the Widow missed and threw TNT in there. And I know the Widow is going to react to this TNT being thrown. So I can pop open the angle and take a shot at them or take a shot at someone else. Timing, as well as resource recognition. Oh, she has to react to this TNT that happened. Oh, my team literally just threw a lamp down because they're annoyed and opened this angle and is shooting at her. And I know because my team opened this angle and is shooting at her that this Widow is either retreating, is almost certainly retreating, is maybe trying to break the lamp or headshot them, is very, very unlikely to be holding the crosshair on me. Now, if I wait 2 seconds into my team doing this, it's possible that she'll have changed her angle and be holding the crosshair on me. But that's, if I understand the resources, I know that no, as soon as my team does that, it's very safe for me to peek. Good question. Good question. What to do if other DPS just has better mechanics than you? Take unfair fights, pick on someone else, win with resources conditions. Number advantage is a pretty big deal in Overwatch. It's not all powerful. It's really not. You can absolutely beat number advantage with angles positioning. You can beat it with even win condition recognition in terms of, oh wait, yeah, you killed someone, but we can immediately trade back because we're all out of cooldowns and health. But if someone is just mechanically meaningfully better than you on the other team, you can either decide, I need to try to lock them down and not let them have much impact. That would be one option, and hope that my team can win. The thing that will generally let you climb ladder faster would be having better mechanics yourself. But what you would generally try to do if you're going, no, I want to have the most impact on whether I win or lose this game, would be try to go first and try to find an elimination before they're able to find an elimination on your team. Because their team will get, depressed. They'll sort of be primed to lose. They'll sort of, not hands off the keyboard, but a sort of spiritual version of that when they lose someone first and it doesn't get traded back within 2-3 seconds or so. So if you can consistently find it first, but being able to do that, well, yes, you can lean on angles for that. You can lean a little bit on timing for that, but not very much. A lot of that comes from mechanics, and if they have better mechanics than you, they're frequently going to be able to do it. On the other hand, if their team was balanced to give them someone very bad on the other team, someone who doesn't understand cover, by all means, just farm them, and then the player on the other team being better than you at mechanics ceases to matter. When is it worth it to trade back or retreat? You're going to have to give me more than that. When is it worth it to trade back or retreat? Generally, if the eliminations happened very recently and you're in a scrappy fight, so something where like, hey, the opponents, it's now a 5v3, that's not a 3, it's now a 5v3 and they got 2 eliminations on us. If the fight is still actively happening, for about 2 seconds, there's a very real possibility that you could trade back the eliminations, even as the 3 into 5, even without better positioning. That goes down over time very rapidly because cooldowns start to tick back on 5 characters rather than on 3 characters, so they get progressively stronger, and healing comes in very rapidly in Overwatch, and these guys have more health that they get to get back total than the 3 people do. So it's pretty much become a route if you're down 2 people and don't have something massive like a huge positional advantage. Ults that are just a free win, like, oh, I don't care that you killed 2 of my teammates. We got hands out of you. We got lamp out of you. Grav Dragon, we win. It doesn't matter that there's only 3 of us. There's things that you can do that you can recognize, but most of the time, even that is a quick trade back, you'll notice. Most of the time it's going to be a case of if trade backs don't happen in a couple seconds, it's time to start kiting back, but you don't kite back like straight back, you kite back into concaves. You generally kite back into concaves when you go down 1 to 2. If you go back more than that, it may be a true route and you may just try to go hard back and get out as hard as you can, or just walk into the opponents and get eliminated or get reset. You can have 4,400 mechanics in Diamond if you have no game sense. Yes, but it's very, very hard if you've played any amount of Overwatch. You're right. If you truly have 4,400 equivalent mechanics because you're coming from a different game and you've played no Overwatch and you somehow just jumped right into comp without having to play any quick play games, that may be possible. It is something that would remedy itself extremely, extremely quickly. And no one who was like considering themselves stuck, for example, no one who's played 100 comp games, no one who's played 50 comp games is going to be stuck in Diamond with 4,400 mechanics. That you don't have 4,400 mechanics because it will have been basically impossible to have not upgraded some of this. You could, I suppose, have just figured out nothing on angles and positioning, but it will have been basically impossible to have not started to put some of this together in terms of resource recognition. J3 did a video where Platts fought masters with no abilities on their heroes. The Platts won 3 out of 4 games, if I remember correctly. Sure, that doesn't shock me. A lot of heroes have a huge amount of their power tied into their cooldowns. But that's not resource recognition, really. That's I have abilities that make up 50% of my hero's power, and you literally never have them. It's not me recognizing what the balance of our two things is, or recognizing that when you're down, these cooldowns are worth more, or hey, I can throw ults into this, but you have the ults to answer, but that's still worth doing. It's not recognizing any of this, or I'm going to force this fight even though you have ults because we have the better angles, and it's just a really bad fight for you. It's none of those things if the opponents literally have had their abilities disabled. Like that's not resource recognition anymore. That's having half of your hero's power taken away, more or less depending on the hero. Especially now the Bastion's meta, if you don't know engagement timing, you're going to die pretty quickly. Right. This meta leans harder on timing and win con recognition, recognizing, oh, Sigma's hands are out, or oh, Orissa's javelin spin is out, or oh, their lamp is out. Oh, their big cooldowns are out, but so is our amp speed, so is our bastion form, so we can't walk on them. Recognizing those things is more important in this meta. I know it's weird, but even though people are like, oh, it's a poke meta, etc., kind of, it's pretty brawl heavy. The way Bastion gets used is really more as a brawl character. Orisa is a brawl character. We're kind of in brawl territory, and this win con recognition stuff is generally more important for dive and brawl than it is for poke. Just, thinking about how important each is for each concept. I'll go through that now because I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. Very important for dive heroes. Very important dive heroes, dive metas. Very important for poke heroes, poke metas. Less important for brawl metas. Still matters, but that would be how I would rate these. Obviously, there's sub metas. There's there's evolutions of metas, things that happen. There's hybrids because almost everything is a hybrid these days. Angles and positioning are going to be less important for brawl again, more important for dive especially, and slightly lesser so for poke. And when we look at timing, this is going to be the least important for poke. Win con recognition, all those things. If you've just taken good angles and have good mechanics, congratulations, you're going to be pretty good at poke. But this win con recognition stuff is going to be much more important for brawl and dive. And you may have noticed something here. This is also sort of going to, as you're going to see from this, tell you what are the most and least complicated comps to run. Dive had to be good at all of these things. It just does. Dive doesn't work until you're pretty good at all of these things. Specifically, you end up running poke dive variants these days because full dive, like full dive, mostly isn't really a thing, but it's really important. You have to have angles. You really need 3 angles to be successful with dive on blowing stuff up. So many anti-dive mechanics have been put into the game that you have to recognize when you've gotten those out and have some way to get those out, which is why poke generally gets splashed into dive comps. And so you need your angles, you need your win con recognition, and yeah, the dive heroes are mechanic heavy. They are. You could argue Winston less so. He has different mechanics, but even if you weren't great at those, you could be successful at dive. But for the rest of the heroes in it, yeah. Then you look at something like poke, and poke is sort of the intermediate comp in terms of execution. Your mechanics absolutely matter. Your mechanics are top tier important, and angles are everything. But getting your timing exactly right, less important. Are you better if you get your timing right? Absolutely. Because you start getting to be able to leapfrog off of each other's peaks, figuring out how to peak the opposing widow. You even figure out how to walk on opponents and finish them in the brawl phase. Yes, even as a poke comp. But this is less elevated as an important feature than it is in the other compositions. Whereas win con recognition for brawl is absolutely everything because that's what it that's what Brawl is. Brawl doesn't lean nearly as heavily on taking angles. It still does need an angle. Brawl does still want to spread out when opponents are far away and poke, but then as opponents get closer, it does tend to clump up, let auras do their thing, let things like Rhine Shield or a tank that they can clump by and do their thing, while maybe only one person sits on an off angle and does work with a late peek after the core has dragged attention, so they get a super powerful late peek, knowing that they're unlikely to get healing, aren't really going to be able to sustain here, etc. So, angles become less important to them. Whereas this timing win con recognition, very important to them in terms of, hey, win con recognition, we need to recognize which cooldowns came out. We may walled them, they may walled us. We got lamp out. Wait, we got their lamp out before we used our lamp. We have the advantage. We need to be pressing W and going for this. Or, hey, we did all this, but their Reaper is stayed in without Wraith form. We need to recognize that advantage, hard target swap to the Reaper, and eliminate the Reaper. That's Brawl. Like, what I literally described is a lot of what's important for playing Brawl at a high level. And I think that covers the three major comps there. Obviously, Brawl would be the simplest, and part of also what makes Brawl the simplest is Brawl is generally looking for same time. It can sort of go, hey, same time. It can shout its things, and they're sort of, you're all together. You can all see very similar things. Brawl is generally easier to synergize with, even on ladder, than the other comps are. Poke gets punished a little bit less for not synergizing super well. It still does need to, but it gets punished a little bit less for it. Okay. Three angles, main angle, off angle, and flank. That's generally how you do it in Overwatch 2. Because flankers can generally sustain without a full support paying attention to them. Usually you're able to go tank angle, non-flanker DPS angle, flanker, and you're able to go support, you're on your own, health packs with maybe a little bit of support love. Then if she don't die, you force cleanse and keep shooting her? Who? I don't know what that's in relation to, sorry. What is the solution to your tank feeding as a DPS player or support? Your tank can't feed if the enemy doesn't have resources to throw at them. Be that they're dead, be that you've taken away the opposing angles, be that you've threatened their backline, so their backline is not able to keep their tank focused up while things are happening. Your tank will die. Your tank may die if he's feeding his brains out, but he does not die as quickly as you can eliminate a Kiriko with all the one-shots in this game, or near one-shots, or as quickly as you can eliminate an Ashe, or a Hanzo, or a Cassidy, or a BAP, or, it might feel like, wait, I can't eliminate a BAP quickly as a Tracer. Yeah, probably. But you know what? If you force BAP to lamp himself, and pay 50% attention to you, it's going to be hard for your tank to feed his brains out. It really is. Because the tank that he's probably stuck fighting isn't getting healing, at least not nearly as much as he was before, and he's not getting pumped full of BAP lead. It's going to be hard for your tank to feed their brains out of that. Say you're playing, but I'm not playing the flanker on my team. I'm playing Echo. Great. You can hit your stickies. Hit your stickies in a focusing beam, and guess what? The opposing Hanzo is dead, so, they're not killing your tank. Tanks are supposed to be able to absorb at least a little bit of a beating. Ones that feed their brains out will absorb that beating too quickly and too much of it and won't use cover and that. But if your support just goes, I'm going to use nade on you, I'm going to use lamp on you, they'll survive for a little bit, and you have to make something happen during that little bit. And if you're the support in this situation, it literally becomes a case of try to get offensive shots in on squishies or things like that in on squishies on the enemy team before your tank is able to fall behind. That will cycle the squishies on the other team out of the fight, even if just for a second or two, and that will cause your tank to not fall as far behind and give your team more time to do stuff. If the other team is just that much better than your tank, where really your tanks are, your tank is shootable super early, the opposing tank is, shootable later, but It's not until a good 2, 3 seconds into the fight that any of the opponent's squishies are open targets or things that you could move your crosshair open to. Congratulations, the other team is better than yours. What do you want me to tell you? That's not just a tank diff anymore. Um. Okay. Hey Garrett. Frito, your Overwatch, said that the meta that feels best are Reiner Winston metas. And does Temporal think that your Overwatch is finally correct? Probably going to agree with that. Yeah. I think Winston metas do feel the best. We always will eventually get complaints about any meta, but Winston metas, I would say, over time, are the meta that gets the least amount of complaints or takes the longest amount of time before people's complaints of this is boring, this is stale, etc. Build up. So I would say that's true of Winston metas, and then to a slightly lesser degree, Reinhardt metas. Reinhardt meta is more interesting than the other Brawl tanks. Let me think about that for a second. Orisa. Uh, yeah. Sigma metas people don't love. I think ball metas are okay. People don't love Doomfist metas. They also don't exist with Sombra in her current state, and they haven't for a while. Yeah, I'd say Winston Ryan is the right answer. I'm perfectly fine with ball metas. I don't. I agree. People don't absolutely love Ramatra metas, though he's not that bad. Sigma is fine when he's relegated to his map type plus a few others. Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with your Overwatch on that one. Spina Farissa is the mercy of tanks. She is just too strong and easy right now. Yeah, she is. That's not great. She got hit with some nerfs. I think it was probably enough what they hit her with, and people are just being a little like, oh no, we're going to keep doing this sort of thing. And yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I think you do find a little bit of playing into Orisa as other tanks feels bad because Orisa can just keep messing you up and let her team feel pretty free, but she's not actually doing anything while she's messing you up as another tank. Ah, Winston, you're not allowed to do anything because I threw a javelin at you and then I javelin spun and you're not allowed to mess with my backline. You're not doing anything to my backline either. Neither of us are going to die. Ah, but you're more vulnerable than me. I mean, I guess you're not gonna kill me. I'm still going to manage to jump out, like even with your chain CCs. It's yeah, yeah. It just feels bad as a tank because she actually has the most CC. She has the most displacement abilities. It's weird to say that she has more CC than Wrecking Ball, but she does while being basically immune to it herself. Um, so it feels bad. And that may be something they need to think about. The fact that she is both the most CC resistant tank and the most CC heavy tank might be something that we go, wait a second, that might not be healthy. Okay. I guess the last thing I could talk about is I could think about this would be what's the most important for each role on these? And again, I sort of said this is the most important for tanks here. This is the most important for tanks. If we continue to go through on tanks, this is the least important for them. This matters, but is going to be tank dependent. Yes, this gets very important on Zarya, a Sigma, a Roadhog. It's still important on things, on a Wrecking Ball. It's still important on things like a Reinhardt, things like a Winston, but it expresses itself differently and in ways that aren't quite as critically important as they are on a Roadhog, a Junker Queen, that sort of thing. Um, so win condition recognition and timing most important for tanks. For DPS, it's going to be mechanics very closely followed by angles positioning. It really is. This matters. This matters, but it's got a little bit of a gap behind these two. And for supports, it's pretty balanced for supports. You do still benefit massively from covering angles, especially if no one on your team is taking angles. You benefit from taking an angle because your team having even a single angle just helps it even a second angle, even if it's just one person on it, even if that's a support, helps the team massively. Um, but it really is, something where you can get away for a lot longer on ladder not doing this as the support sort of thing. It's not quite as game changing. Mechanics matter on supports, but there are more supports that are more forgiving in terms of, and a generous heal hitbox, things like that, Moira, what's aim, that sort of thing. But this stuff matters too, because you really do have to recognize you don't get to pull the trigger necessarily on when your team goes, but you can still scream your butt off as a support for go, 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 walk, that sort of thing. And you really need to understand burst damage and when it's coming. So I'd say these are actually equally important. I would actually put all three of these as equally important, maybe with angles and positioning being slightly behind, as weird as that sounds, for supports compared to the other two. Maybe. Yeah. But overall, like as an Overwatch player in general, work on your mechanics, work on them from the get-go, even if it's just, 20 minutes twice a week, do actual mechanic focused workout. Not I'm playing the game, I'm working on mechanics. That can be with Overwatch launched, but it's, with a code launch that is having you work on your aim, that is letting you work on your aim for 20 minutes sort of thing, that is making you put your crosshair where you want to put it reliably. You should feel a little tired after working on your mechanics for 20 minutes. Angles positioning, single fastest way to improve. It is the low-hanging fruit of improvement in Overwatch. It is how you get gains without actually having to get that much better. It's mostly an understanding involvement and then breaking a few habits so that, when you see red, when you see the enemy weak, you continue to go forward. When you see your team getting pushed, you don't immediately just jump into the situation. You realize, wait, the enemy is walking past me, increasing the strength of my angle. I can punish them from back here. And then this is the more mental, okay, let me do 9,000 IQ, figure out how it all happens, turn my brain into an Overwatch calculator to read on the fly what the ones and zeros are telling me, and aha, I've seen through the matrix, if I walk at this precise moment, we'll win. That's what this is, and you will get this over time, though yes, you should be thinking about it. This is why fights have different outcomes different times. Cool. How to deal with a decent Sombra Tracer as a support Ana. How to deal with a decent Sombra or Tracer as a support playing Ana. They're not that big a deal. Hipfire is pretty OP against Tracer because its hitbox is quite generous with a little bit of practice. So that would be one thing. Putting pressure on Tracer before she gets to your side of the map will also significantly delay her and mess up the opponent's timing. You can make Tracers and Genjis have an absolutely horrible time by putting pressure on them while they're on their half of the map and just significantly delaying their stage time there. Sombra's harder. She is. Sombra's harder. That's going to be the thing where you actually get back to positioning, where you want to be in a place where we look at this and go, well, what falls into positioning, excuse me. What falls into positioning? Friendly sightlines. Make it harder for Sombra to take you out by making sure, ideally, that you can close the angle on the enemy team that's, say, fighting your tank or fighting your front line to fight her while still being in the sight line of your DPS on the wing or your partner support on the wing who can choose to interfere with this fight, healing you, shooting at the Sombra if they want to do so. That's how you deal. That's the actual answer for how you deal with it. This setting up properly, but also you're just going to need some practice hitting hipfire. You are. They don't like you though. I mean, they don't like you because you have a small head hitbox. You have the nade to self heal. If you break sight with them, your self heal will kick in other ways, and you have a sleep dart that instantly wins you the fight. And you can beat them with hipfire or hit scan accurate quickscopes. Like, they do not like you, and Ana is not a soft target. Skill issue. Like if you're getting farmed by a Tracer or Sombra, not by the pair of them, but by either one, that is a skill issue. And the easiest way to fix it is this, but the real answer, and they will eventually hard stop you if you don't do it, is you gotta be able to hit them with some hip fires, or you gotta be able to hit them with some quick scopes. You gotta. How's the new anti hip fire? Not nice to support, not nice to flankers, and neither is Ilari's oversized hit scan shot to that. And I'm not thrilled about that. But Tracer's still an excellent hero to pick because of how Overwatch 2 works, where there isn't really enough support to go around. You know, you sort of have a support who wants to pay attention to the tank, a support who is paying attention to the enemy team and to their thing. Not that the support isn't paying attention to the enemy team, but to their partner DPS, which sort of means, well, what do we do for our last one? Well, either we have our last one be a flanker, or we tuck our last one with the tank group, and then we only have two angles, or we late peak and limit the effectiveness of the last person, if they're a poke DPS. So Tracer still very much has her place, even in a world where Anna's hip fire is pretty big and Ilari's hit scan, railgun, whatever's are pretty darn effective. Okay. I think that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I know it's been a minute since we did one of these, but oh, and it's definitely gotten long enough that it'll scare off the YouTube non-stream audience. But I hope you guys enjoyed. You should definitely join the Discord. It's down there in the description. You can maybe check on how the Northeastern, mostly, a new team rebuild sort of thing, and how they're doing. If you didn't see the match on Tuesday, that was quite the match. We expected to kind of roll the opponents, and we did go up for a quick 2-0, but then they got map 3 in a close one, and things got interesting from there. I won't spoil more. So, definitely be a member of the Discord so you can see when those happen. That one we let stream from Charlie's point of view, but usually I'll be streaming those games with some commentary, and you can even see some between map coaching if you like. But see some nice high-level Overwatch with comms so you can hear what it sounds like. You can see what I'm choosing to steer a team to work on over time. And you'll notice, again, going back to this, I very much focused on this first. I had the team work on, it was a rebuild team, work on taking angles like wild. And that's what they did over the summer. That's what they got. And now we're moving more into this territory. There's a few specific players that I've hammered have to be working on this, but you get the idea. So something you could check out or see when I do these occasional go live videos. But that's going to do it. I will see you guys in the next one.